Mass layoffs and record profits at the same time, manager salaries, scarcity of natural resources, and imminent climate catastrophes, morally questionable advertising, child labor, corporate fraud, financial crisis, and the Occupy Wall Street movement. These are just a few examples you may have heard about under the topic of sustainability, business ethics, or corporate social responsibility. These themes raise questions about justice for current as well as for future generations. We want to ask, corporate social responsibility, CSR for short, what is this? This man made headlines a few years ago. In 2004, Angelo Ugolotti learned from investigators that he was chairman of the board of several companies set up by his employer, the Italian milk concern Parmalat. Angelo, however, had not even heard of those companies. At Parmalat, he was only responsible for the switchboard. You can imagine how the story goes. Corporate fraud at its best, bogus companies, cooking the books, bribery, accounts in the Cayman Islands, the whole works. The task of corporate social responsibility is to prevent these and other morally reprehensible practices which can weaken society, damage companies.
It's coming out from the factories, right? It's a law that there should have been a cover on that. The apparatus, which is known as particle collector, should be given on them so that all smoke goes over there, then you take it off after a couple of months and then you dispose of very remote area where people cannot be affected. Nobody is doing it in Pakistan. We have hundreds of these examples available. You go, people are dying. And there's a law in the safety law, in the health and insurance and everything, that wherever the factory is operating, you cannot ask people to have their residence in the vicinity of that area. Because when the smoke goes out, and when smoke comes down, it makes the lane barren. How can one human life can survive with that, Is that, I ask you a question, is there no responsibility of that, the government or maybe that the company to have that particle collector so that we can save our people? You might have maybe the people living in that vicinity, in the factory's vicinity and that area. They are the most people they are most people infected with this coughing and lots of different problems they do have. So that's an environmental protection. One more example. I don't think so. There are a couple of doctors over here. The medical example. It is the requirement that every hospital should have the apparatus incinerator. Incinerator. That's a big apparatus. You put all the wastage of syringes and bottles, everything into that, and then you, dispose them off in a proper manner. Can you imagine it? You can walk into a hospital. Maybe they do have. Maybe that cancer. Maybe other hospital. You check it out. I'm 100% sure most people will be so much upset you cannot find them. Why? Isn't our responsibility we should go and ask them that please what are you doing? Do you think when the one stone is being thrown on
This is Duke University.
I've been interested in corporate social responsibility, which has been a topic of tremendous interest across the country in boardrooms and classrooms, and now all across the world. And what I'm interested in is how we measure social performance of enterprises. We have a lot of measurements about how to measure a company's financial performance, return on investments, return on assets, etc. But we don't have a lot of ways to measure social performance, and that's what's been the core interest in my work. Issue in the academic literature, and I think among a lot of managers, is that, well, does being good actually mean you do well financially, right? Do socially responsible companies actually perform better? Here, I think a lot of people have accepted that they do, but I think that academic research shows that the jury is still out. It's very difficult to know whether companies that are socially responsible actually perform better, because it's difficult to know whether the companies that spend on social initiatives are just the ones that have the most money to begin with, or the ones that have the biggest marketing department to promote their efforts. So I think that's another goal of future research, is to tease out that relationship and understand whether being good actually means doing well. We just have too many metrics right now. If you look at any company, Philip Morris, for example, which most people might not consider to be a responsible company, has tons of awards on their website, right? The question is, who gave them those awards? How many people were competing for it? And do they really mean anything? So I think the first thing we need to do is cut down on the number of metrics we have. It's kind of counterintuitive in some sense, right? To do more measurement, we actually want to do less, can have it be better. I should say to do better measurement, we actually want to have less measurement. Once we can agree on a bunch of standard metrics about how to measure diversity, community relations, environmental performance, and the rest, it'll be a lot easier for people to interpret these metrics. So that's the first step. The second thing is I think that users of these metrics should have more control over how they use them. Right now, if you invest in a socially responsible mutual fund, you can't necessarily weight how much the fund cares about the environment versus the community versus product safety. Now, I may have specific beliefs about one of those categories or another, so I think that users should be able to weight those in accordance and choose the companies that best represent their values.
Today we are going to talk about multinational companies in Nigeria. The question we aim to answer is, what are the most important multinational companies and how do they make use of corporate social responsibility? As an example, a case study on Shell in Nigeria is used. First, I will give some background information about Nigeria. The Federal Republic of Nigeria is located in West Africa near the Gulf of Guinea, and in the country runs the river Niger. Nigeria is the most populous country in Africa, and with more than 155 million of inhabitants, it is the 7th most populous country in the world. The economy of Nigeria is one of the fastest growing in the world. The IMF further expects an 8% growth in the Nigerian economy in 2011. Nigeria is a former British colony and its independence gained in 1960. Oil prospecting started in Nigeria in the colonial period and nowadays is the world's 8th largest exporter. Petroleum plays a large role in the Nigerian economy, accounting for 40% of GDP and 80% of government earnings. But Nigeria's Delta region experienced serious oil spills and other environmental problems. But the huge oil earnings are connected to corruption. Industry sources say that at least 100,000 barrels, or 4% of national oil exports, are stolen every day in Nigeria. People steal oil and vandalize oil infrastructure in an attempt to gain compensation or cleanup contracts. One way to provide some compensation by multinational companies is by using corporate social responsibility. Corporate social responsibility is a form of corporate self-regulation where businesses ensure that the interests of all members of the public sphere are taken into account. It tries to work in accordance to the international law and ethical standards. Typical for multinational companies is that the motivations to engage in corporate social responsibility are varied, from globalization, consumer and civil society pressures, and response to market forces. The Niger Delta region is seeking for social justice and environmental protection, but the interests of the oil industry are very powerful. These interests belong to the government and the oil firms, which are mostly multinational companies. In order to make up for the government failures and to protect their businesses in the region, these firms often engage in corporate social responsibility. So the history of well-organized corporate social responsibility